So I think ASUS right now makes one of the best Windows handhelds available with the ROG Ally. Hear me out here. It's had a year of updates, support, optimizations. So when I saw them announce this handheld, I was kind of intrigued as to what had changed. I mean, it was only a matter of time before they dropped a revision to compete with the upgraded OLED Steam Decks. So the new ROG Ally X is interesting, not just because it's what the original Ally should have been, but because it now has to release in a market where a lot of people have a distrust for ASUS. And that means people are gonna expect nothing less than perfect if they're even gonna consider this. So this is gonna be a make or break for them right now, especially considering their recent track record. This is an $800 computer, which is a pretty substantial purchase for most of us, and not being able to guarantee the life of your products is kind of crazy. Now, there's a lot of differences here between the X and the original Ally, like twice the battery capacity, chassis redesigns. They did not hold back on this considering it's not even a true next generation upgrade. So, is it worth it? Well, considering I've spent the last couple of weeks daily driving it, are these upgrades on paper worth it to the point where this should even be on your radar? Now, there's basically 4 fundamental changes that are unique to the X, that being the frame, the controls, the internals, and the battery. But really the first thing you'll notice with the Ally X is the new build. It's now thicker and heavier than the previous design. ASUS made an update to the chassis and materials they're using to house the internals, and as a result, you now get a much more comfortable, ergonomic handheld experience. The weight has gone up slightly, enough for you to notice if you're holding them side by side with the original, but what you really notice is the softened corners. They blend in really well. It no longer feels as angular as the previous Ally, which means no more digging into your palms. It's rounded off, and it really feels like an upgrade. Now, the real highlight of these changes, though, are the controls. The triggers and bumpers are now changed, which I think is actually a good thing. They're using this two-toned semi-transparent plastic that's textured, and it offers a way larger surface now. Also, the rear programmable buttons are now way smaller, so you feel like you're not gonna accidentally hit them as much. Side buttons have also been raised, which should create a much more natural responsive input since they don't feel as shallow and loose anymore. A little louder, but not really a big deal. Now, for the main interaction point with these handhelds, honestly, one of my complaints on the original Ally was how loose the thumbsticks were, on top of the fact that the dead zones out of the box were pretty terrible at launch. So what they did with the X actually works really well. They decided to move the D-pad and thumbsticks slightly toward the display, which makes it feel more comfortable when you're using them for prolonged periods. The sticks are now a night and day difference, like incredibly different. It feels like they just took the joysticks out of an Xbox controller and popped them in. The caps grip your finger better. There's a much tighter, finer control to them, and they really feel like some of the best handheld joysticks out there right now. And that's next to the new larger D-pad, which is now multi-textured with a matte plus and diagonals, which are glossy. So yeah, full tune-up on the control side of things that really refines basically every input on the original Ally. Now, how does this all transfer to the actual experience of using these handhelds for multiple hours? That's where you kind of have to look into it further. It's sort of better. They did introduce, in my opinion, something that clashes a bit with the inherent way I hold handhelds. If you take a look at the bottom of the frame, there's this little ramp that tapers off. I understand that the intention here was comfort, but my fingers kind of slip off after a while. Not a deal breaker, but enough where you have to readjust your grip if you're using it for a couple of hours. Of course, comfort and ergos can be subjective. I still find that the weight distribution is a little off when compared to something like a Steam Deck. It just feels heftier. Also, it's matte black now. They're still going with that ASUS gamer drip, but it's more stealthy, so it doesn't get as dirty, but it kind of just blends into the other handhelds now. Basically, the idea is they didn't have to change a lot of these little nitpicks, but they've taken feedback from the community and emphasized changing the things that they thought could have been better. Now, does it mean it's worth it? I think the past couple of weeks using it has been an improvement, but I'll save my whole thoughts for the full review. So that being said, how about the internals now, like the SD card reader? Funny enough, that got completely flipped to the other side now. I have one engineering sample, so I honestly can't reliably tell you if this issue is fully fixed on the wide scale. My unit also has a crunchy right trigger, which is driving me slightly insane. I would assume that the SD card issue would have been prioritized, even if it was behind the curtains, despite everyone kind of being in the dark about this issue. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, the original Ally had a tiny problem that would essentially just nuke your SD card, kind of like Russian roulette. So on the bright side, the X now supports 2280 SSDs, which are way more affordable and have larger capacities. So besides that, the internal chipset remains essentially unchanged, still AMD's Z1 Extreme, but we now have an additional 8 gigs of RAM, 24 gig total, which is now higher speed. So there are certain scenarios where hypothetically you can get performance improvement. ASUS currently does not want any of these performance metrics being shared because everything's being finalized. So to give you an idea of what you could expect, a few months ago we covered frame time differences between Steam Decks with 16 and 32 gigs of RAM. Some games need extra memory, especially when they're trying to use more than the default 16 gig split allocation. However, that's mostly frame time improvements. When it comes to actual FPS improvements, we saw the OLED Steam Deck outperforming the original by a slight margin due to those efficiency tweaks and cooling upgrades. And considering that ASUS upgraded essentially the entire cooling system, they're using smaller, more efficient fans, larger heat pipes, the entire thing now sounds quieter even though it's cooler. They did an excellent job at increasing the airflow, removing heat from components, and making the whole system sound really quiet. So yeah, a little different up top visually. They added a vent, finally did away with the XG mobile port, which, let's be honest, like 99% of people didn't use. Fingerprint reader is supposed to be more accurate and less problematic. They shifted over the volume buttons to a place where they're still really hard to get to. Now, one upgrade that's actually pretty cool is dual USB-C now, with one USB 4 Thunderbolt for external GPUs. You can go crazy with docks and charging now. It's now supposed to support up to 100 watt fast charging, but the charger out of the box didn't get upgraded. So full transparency, channel sponsor Ugreen sent over their own Nexode 100 watt charger. I've been using it to test the Ally X, and it's been generally solid. It'll max out at 100 watt fast charge for a single device. There's 3 USB-C ports, 1 USB-A, so you can fast charge up to 4 devices at once. If you have more than one handheld, like a Steam Deck, an iPhone, iPad, it's pretty compact and portable, so it's convenient to travel with. You don't need to pack multiple different chargers. There's also a PWM chip that internally adjusts the power output along with temperature sensors, so you don't have to worry about anything overheating. You can charge an M2 MacBook Air from dead to 55% in less than 30 minutes. Still testing the charge time with the Ally X, but it's pretty much the fastest charging setup you can hit with the Ally right now. Ugreen also has a 25,000 milliamp hour battery bank that supports up to 140 watt fast charging. That's enough to charge an iPhone 15 more than 5 times. So pretty cool stuff. Everything's gonna be on sale for Ugreen's Prime Day deals. It's up to 41% off, and I'll have everything linked in the description if you're interested in checking it out. Now, as far as the actual battery life improvements, ASUS again doesn't want anyone to post any metrics about this. So how can I convey the difference to you? Well, I think the easiest way I can explain it to you is Ally X has double the capacity, which means we went from 40 watt hours to 80 watt hours. If you take the same car and you double the size of the gas tank, you should have a pretty good idea you're probably gonna go twice as far before you run out of gas. That also means that the previous performance modes last significantly longer than they used to. I don't feel like I have to be near the wall every time I take the Ally anywhere. So it gives you that extra peace of mind that you can reliably travel without the battery being as much of a concern as it used to be. You can use more wattage per profile, so the turbo mode isn't gonna completely obliterate your battery life in like an hour like it used to. The goal of handhelds really is to create a portable gaming experience with as little compromises as possible. So having to just sit near a wall all the time and charge your handheld isn't really gonna cut it. Again, the full review will cover all of this, including the latest Armory Crate software. It's kind of buggy, but that's what I've noticed as of right now. Now, as for performance, the screen is still the same 1080p, 120 Hertz, variable refresh rate. It's an incredibly smooth display. It's the first time I feel like I can enjoy cranking it up to its max potential with AAA games on Windows without as many hiccups as before. So we're really one step closer to an ultimate Windows handheld. A lot of passion and engineering has been put into the Ally X, but it's kind of really hard to ignore the elephant in the room. A product can be fantastic, but if the company behind that product is kind of iffy recently, especially when it comes to warranty and customer service, it kind of makes it difficult to just jump on that product. We need to hold tech companies liable to their promises. I cannot be sure that ASUS will change their warranty treatment practices. So if I had to leave you with something right now, it looks like the Ally X looks extremely compelling. You can tell that the team over at ASUS has put a ton of thought and care into this, but as of right now, I wouldn't pre-order the thing just yet. Like, I won't have any links in the description for it. I would say sit back, wait for the full reviews to come out, see how the launch units review to see if there's any red flags. Hopefully everything comes out okay, and we can be happy to report ASUS has finally woken up and addressed their commitment to support their products. But that's about all I've got for you guys today. Super interesting product. Just kind of wait back and see how ASUS moves forward with it, and then maybe pull the trigger. So please let me know if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns in the description, and I'll try to get to all of them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.